In G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero issue number 7, Cobra Commander called one of his 2 officers Copperhead just before he left them behind and took off in an RTV, rough terrain vehicle. But this is not the same Copperhead that would grow to become a fan favorite. Or is he? Many people will say that Copperhead never actually appeared in Marvel comic books. Let's talk about him. Before we start though, I do want to say thank you, whether it's your first time here or you're back for more, for watching the channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the content we upload just like this each and every week. Let's jump back to the story. Copperhead's action figure debuted in 1984 as the pilot for an air-driven swamp vehicle known as the Water Moccasin. By G.I. Joe issue number 34, the entirety of the 1984 action figure line had debuted in Larry Hama's AR-AH comic book series, with the exception of 2, and those 2 were Scrap Iron and Copperhead. It wouldn't be until comic book issue 208 that Copperhead finally, officially made his AR-AH debut, over 30 years after the franchise began in its current 3.75-inch form. But there's much more to this story than that. We do have Copperhead in 1985's first issue of the G.I. Joe yearbook. Incidentally, it says that Copperhead's also gone by the alternate code names Mamba and Gator, in line with the Jungle Trap episode which premiered on TV the same year. And also of note is that the Water Moccasin itself was seen as early as issue 25, and it came with a guy the Cobra Commander referred to as Driver. The same name we hear in the TV commercial for the vehicle, but the Driver in the comic is in Cobra Trooper gear and not wearing what we'd associate with Copperhead. So if Driver is the same Driver as the commercial, and that Copperhead is in his V1 gear, we could say that this is also Copperhead, although he's just wearing Cobra Trooper uniform and red mask for now. And curiously, this is the same Trooper gear that the soldier from issue 7 wears while holding off both G.I. Joe and October Guard alongside Cobra Commander. So we could say that they're all one and the same, but that's nothing official. Issue 7 is from 1983, so it could just be that Larry Hama got a listing of the upcoming figures for the next year, and he worked in the name before knowing more about the figure that would come in 84. We don't know a whole lot about Copperhead's backstory, although there are some details we can glean by pulling multiple sources together. Copperhead hails from the Florida Everglades, although his 2008 figures file card says an island in the Mediterranean, perhaps in one of the countless marshes, estuaries, and brackish lagoons that line the basin in countries like Morocco, Tunisia, France, Greece, Malta, or even Monaco, which I'll mention again in a moment. Based on its origin, it's curious that the entire operation in the early issues of G.I. Joe, which saw the debut of Zartan in the Florida Everglades, did not explicitly and overtly include Copperhead, along with the rest of the swampiness we got that year. We got Zartan, we got quote-unquote Driver, but no copy. Instead, we had the likes of Firefly and Destro driving the swamp-based vehicles. Copperhead's Brazilian card back does say that he did indeed grow up in the swamps. The figure, made by Estrella, lists him with the codename Pantano, which means simply swamp. It says that his best friends as a child were 2 alligators that frightened the village where he lived. And one day, one of his alligator friends showed him his teeth, so he made the poor animal into a pair of shoes. It also notes that his favorite hobbies are hunting animals and hunting people. Outside of that, his profiles in the likes of G.I. Joe file cards, Order of Battle, and Action Force say that he also loved gambling and speedboat racing, and that came with intimate knowledge of the motors and mechanics and engines and the hulls of various watercraft and swamp vehicles. Eventually coming out of the swamplands, he raced speedboats in high stakes in Monaco and Japan. While I don't normally entertain the continuity outside of the current Hamaverse canon, the Devil's Due battle files provide us with a bit more context around this part of his story. It says that he was indeed heavily involved in gambling, and that he would be on his speedboat racing, often betting on his own races with false identities. He would sabotage his opponents and guarantee his win, and therefore guarantee his payout. He was found out, and the people he was gambling against and his bookies came knocking with shotguns and baseball bats, and so that's when he joined Cobra, to pay off these debts and, I suppose, get a little security around him in the process. Pablo Hidalgo suggests that in his G.I. Joe vs. Cobra guide, that once Copperhead showed Cobra his waterboat and driving skills, they actually killed off his bookies, paid off his debts, so that he would be fully aligned with the Cobra organization. This reflects what we see on his file card as well, although not in so much detail. We get a quote from Etienne Lafitte, codenamed Gung-Ho, who hails from Fer de Lance, Louisiana. He says, "Sure, I know the type. They're all around the Gulf Coast. Trash. Drifters. They can drive a swamp buggy like the devil himself. Rebuild a V8 with a coat hanger and spit fight all night and raise Cain till the cock crows. They got a heart full of gimme and a mouth full of much obliged." Thanks for that quote, Mr. Ho. Copperhead made his debut in the UK in 1987 with Action Force Weekly number 19, although this was more of a cameo appearance than anything else. In Action Force Monthly number 1, which was subsequently the same year in the United States as European Missions 4, Copperhead was in a story written by Dan Abnett and drawn by Doug Braithwaite. In the story, a guy named Thornton and his squad of Cobra, decked out in the same gear that the U.S. Copperhead wore, went after shipwreck and Dr. Forbes as they dove on a sunken Nazi warplane full of gold. In the 9th issue of both European Missions and Action Force Monthly, which came out in 1989, an issue I've talked about in a couple previous videos, we have CoverGirl working in Amsterdam as a trap. She's wearing a fake Watchstar diamond, hoping to draw out the Cobra operatives who wanted the diamond itself to help power a diamond-powered weapon. Weaponsmith, a UK exclusive villain, along with Copperhead, showed up under the direction of Serpentor from Cobra Island, and a whole caper ensues. It's a fun story. This Copperhead is one guy named Copperhead, as opposed to the squad that was under Thornton in the first issue. When G.I. Joe was decommissioned with issue 155 in 94 and Cobra dispersed, Copperhead went to ground, as did most of Cobra at that point, now defeated. Copperhead went back to his gambling ways, and he was called up again when Cobra reformed in 2001, and as the preeminent person on waterborne activities became the head of Cobra's naval forces. In G.I. Joe America's Elite, we also learned that Copperhead was part of Cobra Commander's G.I. Joe replacement, called the Phoenix Guard. In the Phoenix Guard, Copperhead's fake ID was High Tide. Under this fake identity, he was also a New Yorker and a Navy SEAL named Edward Johnson, who went through BUDS and SWC in Coronado, as well as Airborne School at Fort Benning. Also in America's Elite, there was a time when he was off the coast of East Africa with this guy named Ghost Bear, son of Quinn, when they fought Torpedo in a wetsuit. Copperhead was also in the comic book that came in the 25th anniversary 2-pack with Shipwreck, but this was wiped out when we fast forward to Hama's issue 208. Yes, in his debut issue in ARAH issue 208, Fred 191 was in Wendy Torres' office when Scrap Iron, Firefly, and Copperhead decided to make a visit. These three snatched Fred 191, who was a mole embedded as an assistant to Senator Torres, and forced him to detonate a local armory. Then in issue 220, the three parked their sketchy-looking van outside Wendy's office. They inform him that the Cobra World Order plan had been moved up. In issue 221, as Fred and Wendy leave their classified Covert Operations Overwatch Committee meeting, the three Cobra in the van snatched her right off the sidewalk in front of the Capitol building. Turns out that Dr. Mindbender was also in the van with a portable BWS, so they immediately subject her to a brainwave scanner session. And that's really it, his brief amount of time in A Real American Hero. And you will get to see him featured prominently on the cover of issue 274. Copperhead was part of a few mail order ads, such as the Chilling events in 1987, Operation Blackout in 88, which promoted figures and vehicles that were now Hasbro Direct exclusives, discontinued shelf models, if you will. For this one, he had to buy the 6-vehicle driver set for $17 to get Copperhead. The same year, he was in the Is This the End of Slaughter ad. The story with that one was that he was with Stinger Driver and Hiss Driver guarding an outpost in China. It says that Copperhead had Crankcase trapped inside and that Sergeant Slaughter needed to get him before Copperhead straight up murdered Crankcase. Here he was also in a 6-pack for the same $17, but included Crankcase, Frostbite, Thunder himself, and the 2 drivers as a set. There was another one in 89, and the story on that one was that Cobra was installing radio transmitters around the world through which they could broadcast hidden messages encoded with heavy metal music. Yes, maybe the music of Cold Slither. Copperhead was pillaging a village near the transmitter installed in North Asia when Crankcase, Frostbite, and Thunder rolled up on the town to tell him, hey, stop that. In 1992, he was in another Hasbro Direct ad pamphlet called Mission Rescue, whose premise was that Hawk was captured and held prisoner in a maze facility. Another ad, another vehicle set, only this time it's 1950. You'd be 50 cents short on the free sunglasses, forcing you to add something else to your order if you wanted to rock the shades. Kid looked pissed he had to order something extra. Maybe he's just flexing on his friends who cheaped out on their order. He did appear in the Sunbow series, and also here, his appearances were very brief, just 4 episodes to be precise. His first appearance is in an episode called Jungle Trap. It was an episode that found the Joe team in India on a mission to extract Dr. Shakur, but Zartan and his dreadnoughts intercepted him and took him away on Copperhead's vessel. He was in his water moccasin again for Synthoid Conspiracy, chasing Hawk when what sick junkyard on him and they stole his vehicle. His final Sunbow appearance is in the first part of a 2-parter, an episode called Worlds Without End, where he went to an alternate reality, and it was presumed he kind of stayed there. Under Deke, Copperhead was in the Operation Dragonfire miniseries and was with Python Patrol after being Pythonized in the penultimate episode of Operation Dragonfire. He was loyal to Cobra Commander for Deke, but when he changed allegiances to Serpentor, Scoop blew him up, so he didn't last that long there at all. As I mentioned, Copperhead was part of the series 3-wave that debuted in 84. He was available with the Cobra Water Moccasin Moccasin vehicle. There were a couple different versions of his V1 figure. One version, the lighter green version, was the easier one to find. It had light green stripes on his blue helmet as well as green gloves and green armbands, and this actually matches the box art for the water moccasin vehicle. The second version, much more rare, is blue. Some say dark green, but hey, it looks blue to me. The water moccasin vehicle got a television commercial shared with the Joe Sharp, but green version Copperhead is simply noted as driver in the TV ad. That's what I was talking about at the very beginning of this episode. While the V1 figure was discontinued in 1984, the water moccasin continued on for another year, and Copperhead became available very soon thereafter. Hasbro direct mail order program where he was included in those ad pamphlets we just talked about with the figure sets. In 89, he got a much different paint application and became Python Copperhead, now being part of the Python Patrol, which aligned of course with his debut of the Deke series. He had an exclusive figure in 2007, which came with an M16 and an underslung M203, and it's the first time we get to see him unmasked. The fourth version in 2008 is the one that included the issue 5 comic book we talked about earlier and came packaged with Shipwreck. This is the first figure that gives him a birthplace outside of the Florida Everglades. In 2009, Copperhead was packaged with a vehicle called a Stingraider, and Copperhead here came with a crewmate named Swamp Viper. In 2009, Copperhead also came packaged with Gung Ho in a Walmart exclusive 2-pack. This 2-pack's file card says that Copperhead's preferred weapon is a Mars Industries D57A Extreme Electromagnetic Gauze Rifle, along with the Extreme Environment Tactical Rifle. The story on the box is that Gung Ho tracked Copperhead to the bayou to retrieve stolen nanomite technology. And this, by the way, is part of the Rise of Cobra line. There was another version of the Stingraider Swamp Cruiser in 2010, and this version also came with Swamp Viper and was a Toys R Us exclusive. He wasn't used a whole lot on the TV series, nor did Hama use him much in the comic book series, so his greatest area to shine was with his action figures, and he was a fan favorite just because he looked so damn cool. And so there you have it, my friends, the full story of Cobra's Copperhead. Jump down to the comments and we'll continue this conversation down there. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you can be one of the first to know when I upload videos just like this each and every week. I'm Jesse, this is J. Ellis Comics, and I'll see you soon.